Hi, ladies and gentlemen. We are looking at notes 4.5, which are on parallel and perpendicular lines. And these notes are just going to solidify the exploration that we did today in class to talk about what happens when we have parallel and perpendicular lines, okay? So the first question asks us to draw in y equals 3/4 x. So here, when I look at this right here, I see that my m is 3/4 and that my b is 0. So that means I start at 0 and I would go up 3/4 and then I would go up 3/4 again, but I don't have enough room. So I'm going to go down 3 and to the left 4 instead because that's the exact same line. Okay, so then once I graph out my points, all I have to do is connect the dots and then I will have my line right here. So sorry, let me just get my line ready to go. So this is what my line is going to look like right here. However, I want to make sure that it goes all the way through my graph. Okay, so make sure you extend it all the way through your graph and that you also have arrows on the end of your line. Okay, all right, so now that I've written out or drawn out my graph, I need to write out my equation. So I'm going to say y equals 3/4 x right here. And then question number 2 says to sketch in a line that is parallel to the line y equals 3/4 x. So just like we did today in class, all I have to do is take my values right here and move it up or down by the same amount. So I'll move it down, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to move it down by 5. Okay, actually I'll move it down by 2. 1, 2. If I move it down by 2, I get my line, my point on my line is here. If I move this down by 2, 1, 2. And if I move this down by 2, 1, 2. And then if I connect those dots right here, so I'll make a line out of these dots. We'll make it purple and we will make sure there's arrows on the line. So right here, this is what my line will look like. And it's going to be parallel if you do it properly because they go up and over by the same amount each time. So right here, we're going to say y equals 3/4 x. But this time it starts at -2, so it's -2. So it'd be y equals 3/4 x minus 2. And I could draw a line above it, I could draw a line below it, it doesn't really matter. What's going to end up happening is we always have the same slope, okay? Okay, question number 3 says to sketch a line that is perpendicular, and remember perpendicular means that it makes a 90-degree angle to the line y equals 3/4 x, and I want to figure out the equation of my line. Well, remember, if it's perpendicular, we want to make a 90-degree angle, so that's why we have a protractor on the screen right here. So if you look right here, I'm going to create a 90-degree angle with my graph. So here, if I go all the way up to here, that's my 90-degree angle. And I have a point on my line right here. I'm going to put my protractor on that point. It doesn't really matter what point on the line it is unless it specifically tells you. So I'm going to say that it's going to have a point on my line right here, okay? So I know that anywhere along this blue line would be considered a perpendicular line. So I would have a perpendicular line all along this blue line right here. So when I graphed it out, I can say, oh, I have a point right here and it extends all the way through right here. So then once I figure that out, I can get rid of my protractor, but we don't want to make it super large. We'll just move it over. And if you notice right here, it's going to go through the point 5 right here. So I can go ahead and delete this wavy line right here, and then I can use my ruler to actually draw in a proper line right here. So my line that's going to work for me is going to look as follows. So here is my perpendicular line right here. And let me just adjust it a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. And there we go. We've got our perpendicular line and we're good to go. And if you notice, our perpendicular line makes our 90-degree angle with the pink line as well as with the purple line. It's going to make a 90-degree angle with anything that has a slope of 3/4. So the question is, what's the equation of my line? So I have to figure out, well, what's my m and what's my b? Well, in order for my m and b to work out for me, I need 2 points on my line. I'm not going to use this one because this one is really hard for me to see. So I'm going to use this one right here because it's a good solid coordinate right here. So when I graph this out, I can see, oh, my graph, my delta y is going down by 4. Don't forget the negative here because it's going down by 4, and it's going over by 3. So to find my m, I do delta y over delta x. So I get negative 4 over 3, and then to find my b, I see that it starts at 5. So therefore, my equation that I'm going to have is y equals negative 4 over 3x plus 5. Now, hopefully you noticed this in today's lesson, that the original line had a slope of 3/4, and the parallel line also had a slope of 3/4. So when we have parallel lines, their slopes are going to be the same. And that should make sense to you because they rise and they run by the same amount each time. When I have perpendicular lines, they have to flip. So we're going to have the reciprocal right here. So we'll get the reciprocal, and it's always also going to be the opposite sign, which should make sense again because in order to get perpendicular lines, if one goes up, the other one has to go down. Okay? So what do you notice? We're going to write down for parallel lines, their slopes are the same. Okay, but the y-intercepts have to be different because if they're the same, then it'll just be the same line, right? Now, if we have perpendicular lines, we notice that we have to flip our fractions. If it was originally 3/4, we flip it and we do the opposite sign. So that's called negative reciprocals. So our slopes are going to be negative reciprocals. But the y-intercepts can be the same or different. It doesn't matter. Okay, so one last thing about parallel and perpendicular though is I want you guys to be familiar with the notation. So the notation for parallel is going to look like this, and that should make sense because we've got two parallel lines, and then the notation for perpendicular is going to look like an upside down T, and that should make sense because these make right angles with each other. Okay, so let's summarize our information. If we have parallel lines, the slopes are going to be the same. The y-intercepts have to be different. And if we have perpendicular lines, the slopes are going to be negative reciprocals. And we'll write down that a reciprocal means that we have to flip it. And then the y-intercepts can be the same or different. So they can be the same or different. It depends on the problem. Okay, so an example that we have here is if the original was y equals negative 3x plus, actually let's do negative 2x plus 8, then a parallel line right here would have to be y equals negative 2x, and then it could be plus or minus any number we want. So we'll just say plus 7. As long as b is not 8, that's all that matters. Okay? And then for perpendicular, we have to take our slope, which is negative 2 over 1, and we have to flip it. So we get 1 over 2, and then we change the sign. So if it was originally negative, now it's positive. So we would say y equals 1 over 2x, and then our y-intercept can be anything we want. So we'll say it's 5. Okay? All right, so based on that information, what is the slope of a line that is, and then we have two questions here, A and B. I want you to try A and B on your own. Pause the video, see what you get, and then compare your answers with me to see if you're right or not. Please make sure you actually pause the video and make sure that you try this on your own so you give yourself a chance to be successful. Okay, so if it's parallel to the line with a slope of negative 3, it means they have the same slope, so the slope would also be negative 3. If it's perpendicular to a line with a slope of negative 3, then I take negative 3, I would flip it over, remember this is 3 over 1, and I would change the sign so it's 1/3. Okay? Now, if it's parallel to a line with a slope of 0, the slopes are the same, so it's going to be 0. But perpendicular to a line with a slope of 0, I take 0 over 1, I flip it, I get 1 over 0, which I cannot do, so we end up getting an undefined slope. And this should make sense to you, because if it has a slope of 0, it's a horizontal line, and if it has an undefined slope, it's a perpendicular, or sorry, a vertical line, and these lines are definitely perpendicular to each other. Okay, question number 6 on page 9. What is the equation of a line that is parallel, so that's important, it's parallel to the line whose equation is negative 2y equals 4x minus 8 and has the same y-intercept as 5y equals 3x minus 10. So for questions like this, I need to make sure that all of my equations are in y equals mx plus b format to help me out, okay? Also, we have our original equations, our original relations, and then we're going to have our new relations. So what's going to end up happening is I want to know what's the equation of my parallel line. So I want to figure out, well, what's m parallel going to be equal to, and what's the parallel b going to be equal to? So essentially, what's the slope of my parallel line, and what's the y-intercept of my parallel line? Well, it says that it's parallel to this equation right here. So it means that it's going to have the same slope as this equation. But when I look at this equation, I don't know my slope. So in order to get my slope, I'm going to isolate the y. So I'm going to divide everything through by negative 2. So I end up getting y equals, this becomes negative 2x, and this becomes plus 4. So therefore, my slope of this original line, we're going to write down that this is still an original line, so don't get that confused, is negative 2. So the slope of my parallel line will also be negative 2. It's no longer a mystery. Okay? Now I need to figure out, well, what's the y-intercept of my parallel line? Well, it says that it has the same y-intercept as this equation right here, but in this equation, I don't know what my y-intercept is because the y is not isolated. So I'm going to isolate the y. So we're going to say it's going to have the same b as this value right here. So to isolate the y, I'm going to divide everything by 5. So I get y equals 3 over 5x minus 2. So that means that the b value of my parallel line, since it's the same as this b value, is also negative 2. So it's no longer a mystery. It's just a coincidence, by the way, that they're exactly the same. Okay? So now I know the slope of my parallel line and the y-intercept of my parallel line. So I can write out my equation, and my equation is going to be y equals negative 2x minus 2. And this is going to be my parallel line that I'm looking for, not this line or that line. Okay? All right, so now number 7. Which equation represents a line that is perpendicular to the line whose equation is this? So this time I need a perpendicular answer. M perpendicular and B perpendicular. Neither one of these things is given to me. So I need to figure out what it's going to be. Well, if I look right here, in order to be able to figure out the slope of this line, I need to isolate the y. So I'm going to divide everything by negative 2, and I get y equals negative 3 over 2x minus 7 over 2. So I know that the slope of my original, and again, this is the original, it's key that you know that, the slope of my original line is negative 3 over 2. Well, what do I know about slopes of my perpendicular lines? We know, we figured out right here, that we have to take the negative, we have to take the, I don't know why it keeps doing that. We have to take the negative reciprocal of our slope. So I'm going to take this slope right here, and I'm going to do the negative reciprocal of it. So I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to change the sign. So now it's no longer unknown. When I flip 3 over 2, I get 2 over 3, and I change the negative into a positive, so I get positive 2 over 3. So now that I've done that, it doesn't give me any more information, so my y-intercept is going to stay a mystery. It could be any y-intercept because it doesn't have to go through a specific point. So I'm going to look for the equation that has 2 over 3 as my slope. This is what I'm looking for, okay? So question A, the y is already alone. Is my slope 2 over 3? Absolutely not. My slope is 1, so that doesn't work. Now let's look at D. In D, my slope is 3 over 2, so that also doesn't work, okay? So let's isolate the y's in these last equations here. So when I divide by 3 here, I get y equals 2 over 3x minus 2, which gives me the slope that I want here. I'm looking for a slope of 2 over 3. So B is my correct answer, but I'm going to just check to make sure that C is not the right answer. So I'm going to divide everything by 2 here, and I get y equals 3 over 2x minus 3 over 2. Well, this doesn't have the slope that I'm looking for, so C is not right. Therefore, B is my correct answer for question number 7. Okay? All right, guys, hang in there. 2 more questions to go. Number 8, find the equation of a line that is parallel. So it's important that we write down that it's parallel to the line 3y minus 4x plus 8 equals 0, and also passes through the point 6, 2. So since it's parallel, I want to figure out the slope of my parallel line and the y-intercept of my parallel line. Neither of those pieces of information are given to me yet. However, I know that the slope of a parallel line is going to be the same slope as the line it's parallel to. So how do I find the slope of this equation? I need to isolate the y. So 3y minus 4x plus 8 equals 0. I'm going to add 4x and subtract 8 from both sides. So add 4x, subtract 8. So I get 3y equals 4x minus 8. Divide everything by 3. So I get y equals 4/3 x minus 8 over 3. Well, if my new line right here has the same slope as my original line right here, then I can say since this has a slope of 4/3, my parallel line also has a slope of 4/3. But I don't know what my y-intercept is. So I'm going to use y equals mx plus b to figure it out because I know it has to go through a point 6, 2. So how do I do that? Every time I see a y, I'm going to replace it with 2. You know what, before we do that, actually, let's say we'll write down y equals 4/3 x plus b. Every time I see a y, I'm going to plug in 2. Every time I see an x, I'm going to plug in 6. And I'm going to make this 6 over 1 plus b. Okay, so now let's do this multiplication on the side over here. So I get 4/3 times 6 over 1, so I get 24 over 3, which is 8. So I get 2 equals 8 plus b. Subtract the 8 from both sides, I get negative 6 equals b. So this is going to be the y-intercept of my parallel line. So right here, this is going to be negative 6. So then we say that our equation is y equals 4/3 x minus 6, and that's my answer. Okay, so question number 9 says find the equation of a line that's perpendicular. So this time we've got it is perpendicular to this line and passes through the point negative 8, 1. So here on the side for my new line, I want to figure out what my perpendicular slope is going to be and what the y-intercept of my perpendicular line is going to be. So if you notice right here, this equation right here is exactly the same as the equation that we're looking at here. So I know I've already simplified it. I've already gotten the y alone. I know that this is equivalent to y equals 4/3 x minus 8/3. I'm not going to go through and re-isolate the y because I'll get the exact same answer. Remember again, this is the original line, okay? And if this has a slope of 4/3, so this is this original slope, then what's the slope of my perpendicular line? Well, remember, we have to take the reciprocal of this number right here. So we flip it, and then we change the sign. So since it's originally positive, it's going to become negative. So this is going to become negative 3/4. But my y-intercept is still unknown. So in order to calculate my y-intercept, I'm going to use y equals mx plus b, just like we did up here. So I'm going to say y equals, instead of m being 4/3, this time we're going to use negative 3/4. So we'll get y equals negative 3/4 x plus b. And I'm going to plug in negative 8 for x and 1 for y. So I'm going to plug in 1 for y, and I'm going to plug in negative 8 over 1 for x. And just like I did before, I'm going to do this multiplication on the side over here. So it's negative 3 over 4 times negative 8 over 1. Negative 3 times negative 8 is positive 24. 4 times 1 is 4, and then 24 divided by 4 is 6. So this value turns into 6. Now all I have to do is subtract 6 from both sides, so I get negative 5 equals b. So the b, or the y-intercept of my perpendicular line, is no longer a mystery. I know it's negative 5. So the answer to my equation for my perpendicular line is going to be y equals negative 3/4 x minus 5. All right, I know that was a lot of information to take in, so if you have any questions, make sure you ask me. Make sure you rewatch anything that might have been confusing to you. I know it's a lengthy video as well, but it's really important that you understand this information. Next time I see you guys in class, we are going to show how this works graphically using graphing calculator technology, and that's going to help us kind of solidify our understanding of parallel and perpendicular lines. All right, I hope you have a great day. Bye.